Welcome to the Bridge the Gap podcast. Here's your host, Dustin Udke.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Bridge the Gap. We got a good episode tonight for you. We're going to be talking all things DFS, so daily fantasy sports. If that's your jam, or maybe it's not and you want to learn a bit about it, we got a great show to kind of give you everything you need to know about DFS, what it is, why we like it, and maybe some tips and tricks. And when I was thinking of DFS, there's only one person I thought I could bring on, and that is a contributor from Fantasy Alarm. He contributes plays Colby Conway. Welcome to the show. Colby, how's it going tonight?
I'm doing well. Things are going well. There's obviously a pretty big event happening today, as well as the election in the United States, I guess you could say, with the trade deadline and everything. But, if you need a little break from that and all of the electoral college, blues, reds, you want to talk DFS and get away from, all the news network just for a little reprieve for a half hour or so, come on in. We'll hang out. We'll have a good time talking DFS.
Yeah, and if you guys got comments about DFS, drop them over on the YouTube channel. We'll gladly answer your questions. So, Colby, before we get started, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you and what kind of stuff you got going on this year?
Absolutely. Over on X at Colby R. Conway, you can find my writing for a couple different places. We got Fantasy Alarm, we got Fantasy and Frames, we got Big Guy Fantasy Sports with the mind behind the Fantasy Football Expo in Bob Lung. And then if you're not following Fantasy Spin over on X as well, you'll see me putting out some content throughout the week there, trying to spin to win a little bit over there. So I'm a little bit all over the place, my friend.
Yeah, and we've been playing Fantasy Spin, and we had Will on a couple weeks ago for our first Fantasy Innovators talking about Fantasy Spin, a great DFS style app that we've been playing. You don't do just football. You're also a baseball guy. You do other sports as well. So I think you're well-rounded when it comes to the DFS space in terms of you do multiple sports. You're knowledgeable. I think you're probably more knowledgeable about baseball than maybe football on some levels. Like, you know a ton about baseball, and you cover that pretty well, and you can handle your own in basketball and probably pretty much any sport. I know Will is talking about getting some different sports over there on Fantasy Spin, some cricket and some other weird things coming up in the future. So it'll be fun. So before we get into DFS, we always start all of our shows with a game.
What exactly is the game?
Well, it is not a quiz or a trivia contest, nor is it a test of brute strength or athleticism. At its core, it's just a children's game, and I would wager that some of you here this evening have played Would You Rather?
So I got a would you rather for you, Colby. And when we're talking DFS is our weekly contest, generally daily for football or basketball or baseball, where you enter and you can win a prize. So would you rather win one contest every week for the NFL season and you win $5? So every week you can enter and you win $5. That's going to be your prize every week. And you're going to win that for 18 weeks. Or would you rather win one contest for the year? That's all you're winning for the NFL season is one contest, but you're going to win $200. Which would you rather have?
I mean, so of course, when I saw the prompt, the mathematical side of my brain started working, and I started going to what numbers roughly are we talking where it becomes more profitable for one for the other. But I'll answer it more for me. I am not a high budget DFS player, to be honest. I keep things pretty low, and I generally play a lot of 50-50s and double ups. That's what I'm looking to do. I'm not looking to retire from a big DFS weekend. Yeah. I want to be profitable and kind of stick with my process throughout the whole year. So knowing me, I'd probably do $5 double ups every single week. So when you started crunching the numbers there, it would actually be more profitable. No, I lied. If I do the 5 at 18, it's 90. I'd be 110 for the one for 200. So I know it'd actually be $20 more to win the contest for 200. But I'm going to go with the process, and then I want to be cashing every single week. So over at Big Guy Fantasy Sports, what Ron Rigney and I do is the consistently cashing podcast. And we're not going to get you the lineup that wins the Millie Maker. We're getting you the lineup that puts you in the top 50%. That's what we're looking to do. So honestly, for me, I think I'd swallow the $20 profit and just have a good process that cashes each week. So give me the $5 profit every single week.
Yeah, that's how I phrase this question is, would you rather be consistently winning something every week and be consistent, or just have that one maybe fluke where you win a big chunk? And I think if that 200 was 500, 1,000, I think it would swing that other way, because obviously that's a good chunk of change. But I agree with you. I think me and you are very similar, and I want to have a good process. I want to know that I can repeat what I'm doing. I don't want it to just be a fluke or luck. I want to know that it was some sort of skill, and I like DFS contests that involve some sort of skill, because that's validating to me in my process, not just like, oh, I happened to randomly pick, Foster Moreau and he had 2 touchdowns and I just happened to randomly get him, or he was all I could afford. So I agree with you. I want the consistency of winning one every week. And even if it's just a $5, you're right, it's going to be, $20 difference, but I'll take that and over the one big one, because I think the one big one is luck at the end of the day. Like, you can say it's skill, but if you can't repeat it, it's not skill. So that's part of it.
Sure, and with that question too, it honestly it comes down to where you fall on the spectrum of kind of where your biases fall. If you are
Mhm.
kind of that GPP tournament player by nature, or if you are the cash game player by nature. Like, sure, when I was in college, did I have it set up where you have basically, I'm trying to remember the exact number I had. It might have been like $10 a week, $5 double up, $3 triple up, and then you had 2 in like a quintuple or some large scale
Yeah.
tournament. The other thing too, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but contest selection is such a big thing. So where do I lie? I am a cash game player. That's what I've been for years. I am okay turning 5 into 10 every Sunday, or 2 into 4. Like, however much I play, that's totally fine. I'm not in there doing, 7 different entries at $20 a pop to try to win the Millie Maker. I just don't I don't build lineups that way. To those who have that GPP tournament mind, more power to you. I love the confidence. I don't have that. That's just not, this brain doesn't quite work that way. I am a cash game player. So I think basically with that question too, it comes down to, are you cash game or tournament? I lean cash games. It kind of seems like you're in that boat as well. So yeah,
For me, it's just it's a risk reward thing. Like, if I'm going to risk $5 to win 10, that's great. Now, if I can risk $5 to win, if I can $5 to win 10 and it's only a contest of 2 or 3 people, I feel like my odds of being smarter than those 2 or 3 people is higher. If
Mhm.
I'm risking $5 to try to win 200 and I have to do that for 18 weeks to hope to get 1, like, I'm hoping that I'm the smartest. Am I the smartest guy in the room? Probably not. Like, I think I am above average in intelligence and lineup setting. I don't think I'm in the top 5 to 10%. I think I'm above average, and I just wanna find it where I can, my above averageness will enough for me to cash. And I just
What
don't wanna risk a bunch and not win. I think I'd rather just have consistently, just like you said, double up every week, make some money. As long as you're profitable, I think that's huge. So,
Mhm.
let's
Absolutely.
talk about DFS. What is DFS to you? And explain to people the difference between DFS and sports betting, because I think those two kind of get lumped in together, and I think they are very different.
They are, because a lot of times what you end up seeing is, especially for content creators or those who do research into certain things, when I'm doing research for like the DFS wide receiver coach at Fantasy Alarm, when I inherently come to look at player props for that weekend, all of that research I've done is going to that. So it's very easy to research for the two of them. The main real difference is, like, at the end of the day, you're still picking players that you think are going to do well,
Yep.
but different games provide a different game element. I am not simply betting on the total in a particular game or Nico Collins to go over his receiving yards. You have elements like DraftKings and FanDuel where I'm picking Nico Collins to have a good day, sure, but he has a salary associated with him. I have a budget that I have to build around. DraftKings is not stopping me from making a 10-leg parlay with the 10 best players in the National Football League.
Yep.
But I'll tell you what DraftKings is doing. They are stopping me from doing that in their Millie Maker and their double ups. They won't let me get all those studs because you have a budget and players have prices. And a lot of times too, with like DFS and betting, DFS is all about fantasy points. Not many sports books have like a fantasy points line. Like Prize Picks will give you stuff like that in Underdog, but not DraftKings and FanDuel. So DFS truly, to me, it is a game. There's usually some gamey element to it, whether it's with DraftKings, you have the DraftKings and FanDuel have salaries. If you go to Underdog, you're doing a snake draft in, certain things like that. With Fantasy Spin, you are spinning random
Yep.
players. With another site that I love, it's called Smash Up Fantasy Sports. They were at the expo as well. You're building a DFS lineup. Players have a salary. You have that. Then you have these cards that you can get to power up and take points from your quarterback to give to the wide receiver. Missed field goals are worth points. There is a gamey element in DFS, whereas traditional sports betting is not really a game per se. There's no game element to it. It's more or less. It's over under, whatever terminology you want to use.
Yeah, I think that's a really good distinction, that it is a game element to it, and you have to play within the rules of the game. You're right. DraftKings FanDuels, you can go and bet Derrick Henry's going to score a touchdown, like anytime touchdown scorer, because he's scored 10 weeks in a row. And you can make that part of your parlay, but you can't go, on betting, you can go, he's going to score, Josh Allen's going to run for 10 yards. You can pick over, and you can actually bet that players are going to suck. You can't do that in DFS. You don't want to do that. You want to pick players going to be like, you can go in and go, hey, I think, who pick a player. Zay Flowers is going to have a bad week because Rashad Bateman came in, or George Pickens is going to have a low week because they just traded for a guy, or whatever that might be. They traded for Mike Williams, so maybe George Pickens' volume comes down. You can bank on him having a bad game. You can't do that in DFS, and there is that game that you need to fit within the constraints, whether that is a salary cap, whether it is the spins, whether it is the power-ups and how you use it. Been playing on Locker, and they have the team boost where you select a guy and you think like, hey, can I boost them for extra yardage or touchdowns or team boost? All those things make it so in those situations, if we both have Derrick Henry, but I use my boost, Derrick Henry scores me more points than you. So you do have to play that game aspect of it, which I think is really like. So generally, what is your strategy when you're building a football DFS lineup? Like, how do you go about, where do you start? How do you build your lineup? Like, what's your thought process and philosophy for that?
Sure. So ultimately, what we're doing first is I'm looking at matchups and I'm looking at games. Now, also, depending on how you go into actual lineup building, that depends kind of your contest selection as well. So for cash game builds, I'm looking to finish in the top 50 or like 48%, depending on like what it ends up being per the site in the contest. But what am I looking for in those? I want high floor players. And a lot of times you want pieces of good games. You want to stack a little bit. You want to do all those cool things when it comes to setting lines. But ultimately, I am going for a high floor, and I am okay sacrificing some ceiling to have that high floor. Because again, I don't have to finish in the top 5%. I just got to be in the top 45%. Now, the difference is when building a lineup, if you're going to start doing tournaments like the Millie Maker, you're probably loading up a game. You're going with game script. You're going with game flow. So a lot of times when you see Millie Maker lineups, there are like I'm trying to think, the Bucks 49ers is the highest total on the main slate right now in FanDuel and DraftKings. You'll probably see if that game does pop off, like Vegas thinks it will. Don't be surprised if the Millie Maker winning lineup is like Brock Purdy, George Kittle, Pearsall, and then they'll bring it back with maybe Kate Otten. Maybe they go double tight end. If that game pops off, you're going to see that. And that's the big thing why I struggle with Millie Makers in the big tournaments. It is awesome when you win it. Seeing those winning lineups, there is no way I could push the submit button for $20 when looking at that lineup. I couldn't do it. I struggle with that. So that's where I really end up setting lane at that cash games. But general strategy when building a lineup, I'm going to talk about cash games. High floor, high floor, high floor. It's okay to sacrifice some of that ceiling. And you get good players. You hope for the most fantasy points. And again, you go for the floor. So like maybe I'm not looking at let's see, like who's like a boomer bust guy. Like I may not necessarily be looking at like Jameson Williams, whereas I will settle more in like the Brian Thomas Jr. is a really bad example. Maybe like Calvin Ridley. Okay. The floor is a little higher with Ridley right now. God forbid we avoid these 0 weeks that he tends to put up. But lately the targets have been there. Like I'm okay taking that. Like when I'm looking at my range of outcomes, I'm okay with this instead of this because this is what I want to avoid down here. So again, I hate to keep defaulting to it. Comes down to game to contest selection, but that's really what it does end up coming down to.
No, I agree with you. And I think for me, and generally in fantasy, I am a very risk adverse person and I want that consistency. So that's why I created a consistency metrics this year with like variance of like, what is their variance between their floor? And I want low variance players. And I agree with you. I can't have a fantasy team that has, even it's hard for me to stack to have 2 players from one team because if that team's on a bye or that team has a bad week, my fantasy team is sunk. I'm in a league right now where I have Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir, and I'm struggling because I don't want to start. I'm like, I want to start both of them, but I don't want to start either of them because if they have a bad week, they both have a bad week. And so I can see that in DFS where you're like, man, it makes sense because those are going to be the games. If you can get the Tampa Bay, San Francisco, or this past week, Tampa Bay, Kansas City, if that was a matchup, like a game that's going to score where it's going to be 35-38 is the final score. The problem is those you're taking that risk because if Austin that game is 10-7, well, you're out. Then you just lost. And I think that's where you're playing as is like you have to swing for the fences in those big milli maker tournaments. And I think cash games are different because you just want that. You're right. You're saying you just got to be in that 45 percentile. You don't need to be top 10. You just need to be top 45 or whatever that is. And I think that's huge. How do you go about finding chalk players? So the guys like a Christian McCaffrey, who you know is going to score good, versus someone like a sleeper, like let's say a K. Dotton 2 weeks ago, who no one really was playing, and all of a sudden was like, hey, he's going to have a great matchup. I know you said you look at matchups. Are there any other ways that you find or evaluate the balance of sleepers and chalk, and then find sleepers?
Sure. So a lot of times it comes down to research. Over at Fantasy Alarm, we do have like a D.F.S ownership projection, which I really like to use just to kind of get an idea. Again, for cash games, it's a little less imperative. For tourneys, it's really nice to try to figure out like, okay, so if everybody's going to be on Justin Jefferson this week because he's going against the worst secondary in the National Football League. Well, what if I want to try to get like some leverage or zig when others zag? If everybody goes Justin Jefferson, what if I save a little bit and go to like CeeDee Lamb? I wouldn't do that this week because of no Dak and potentially no
Right,
CeeDee.
yeah.
Yeah. But like that's something that you can do where you can use those ownership projections. In terms of research, honestly, I love staying on top of injury reports because that's going to open up a lot of chalk. Like whenever you have a running back that doesn't play, the algorithm and the pricing doesn't catch up. So you get like free squares like that. And then when you get in double ups, if 70% of the contest is going to be in on insert backup here, you can be in on that chalk because everybody's in on it. It doesn't matter. So you're doing research in it. You're looking at matchups. You can go to like Fantasy Points Data Suite if you have a subscription there and dive into every single metric under the sun. Look at receivers. We're looking at receivers against coverages, especially teams that are very man heavy, because you get those. Like last week, I was all in on Ladd McConkey because he destroys man coverage. He was fine. He gave enough ROI there for us.
Yeah.
And then it's really what it kind of comes down to. You're just looking at matchups. You're looking at who's stepping up into a role. You're looking at matchup, game flow. Like it seems like this year, whenever Baltimore's projected to win, Derrick Henry is going to go nuclear. And if they're not, he only does very, very good. So ultimately, it's just a lot of research. You're looking at the slate, looking at price points. And sometimes there are players that just come at a good price point. Like last week, this goes more to matchup. So like Zay Flowers, I loved him last week. Pat Surtain does not go into the slot. Flowers is going to eat in the slot. He was fine. So he's going to be in a good spot. When you look this week, like a guy like Cortland Sutton has to go against a very tough Kansas City secondary on perimeter receivers.
Yeah,
however,
McDuffie,
with how relatively cheap Sutton is with his workload in this passing offense, I don't think I'm writing him off per se. DeAndre Hopkins, same type thing. He went into the slot a little bit in week 9. I'd expect them to do more of that because guess who they play? Denver. Guess who doesn't go into the slot? Pat Surtain. Same exact thing. Like you look at matchups, you look at trends, and you figure out who's in those good spots. Or simply put, take like Parker Washington for Jacksonville, who's dirt cheap, because at the very least, Jacksonville is going to be playing from behind and they're going to throw the ball. So take a look at game script, look at matchup, and don't be, what's the word I'm looking for? Put the ego aside, be humble. Vegas does know more than you. Once I came to grips with that, things were much better. Things were much easier.
Yeah, and utilize the tools. I think you brought up like, Fantasy Alarm has good tools. Fantasy data, they're sweet if you pay for that. I like PFF has their wide receiver cornerback rating. So I write an article for Fantrax. I do wide receivers and tight ends, streamers and sleepers, and I kind of look at that like who's giving up points to wide receivers. Then I look at the matchup. So you're right. Hey, if let's say Seattle's giving up a ton of points, but they have one really good cornerback, well, then I'll take the second receiver in the team because their second cornerback is really bad. For me, when I'm building lineups and I'm looking at, I always start. So I play a lot on Yahoo just because I have free money because they keep giving me free money.
Their price
when I'm building
interesting.
I build my lineup there, I start with the defense. I go to the bottom, find the cheapest defense that I'm willing to play, right? And that's a way of like saving money. So I'm like, hey, if the top defense is $20, but I can get one for $14, that's still decent. That saves me $4 and I can use it elsewhere. It allows me to kind of balance the two. Because I think you do when you're talking about these budgets, you have to find ways of saving money. So a lot of these times you're playing a 3 wide receivers or 2 wide receivers, 2 flex. And you have to find a way of finding that kind of cheap receiver. You're right. You can't go out and get Justin Jefferson, Amon St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb every week. You have to find a Parker Washington or a Lad McConkey that's cheaper and, kind of bounce that. So that's what I do. I start with my defense and go, okay, who's the cheapest defense I'm willing to take? So I start at the bottom, work my way up and go, okay, here's the defense that's playing, Carolina or, New Orleans or one of these bad teams. Slap them in, save a couple bucks. And it's funny that it doesn't sound like $4 doesn't sound like a lot, but $4 can be the difference in a wide receiver 2 versus a wide receiver 4. And if you can save a couple bucks here and there. So I do that usually with defenses, then go to tight end because a lot of times I can find a cheaper tight end, go down a little bit and go, okay, I go down basically where the starters stop and I go back up. Okay, here, I'll take this guy. I'll take a guy with volume. You talked about ownership, and I want to talk a little more about that. And let's talk about how that's important when you're talking about finding outliers, because you're right. If everyone's going to be in on Justin Jefferson, what's the thought process in if 80% of the people are in on Justin Jefferson, do I go in on Justin Jefferson just to negate that? So basically we're all playing with 5 people instead of 6, or do I go and find an outlier because I want to be different? And what's your thought process on balancing outliers versus just kind of rolling with ownership percentages?
Again, contest selection, right? In chalk or in cash games, I'm okay eating the chalk, swallowing the chalk, whatever terminology you want to use.
Mm-hmm.
When you get into tournaments is all about being different from the pack. And it's not in every single spot, but it's in a couple. Like a lot of times you'll hear folks when they talk about their tournaments that they enter, they'll do 3 entries, but in all 3, they have a core 4 or a core 5. Then the other 4 spots shift. But like looking at DraftKings pricing this week, Justin Jefferson's at 8,800. If everybody's going to go there because they're paying up, what if you went to Garrett Wilson at 7,200? You saved 1,600. You have a less owned player. What happens if Minnesota gets up 21-0 and it just so happens that it's another freaking Josh Oliver week and he steals 2 of the touchdowns, Jalen Naylor gets 1, and Jefferson comes out of here with like a 6 for 70. At $8,800, that's not winning you, Jack, you know what? You're done. Like you're already done. So then you start going like, okay, so if everyone's going to go Jefferson and Darnold, because looking at DraftKings pricing, that's 88 and 62. So that's 15 grand. What if someone's like, all right, well, I'll go Aaron Rodgers at 5,700 and Garrett Wilson at 72. That puts you at 12.9. You're 2,100 under the other one. If you match that production, you're now $2,100. If we put it in a vacuum, you might be able to go up to Alvin Kamara while they're stuck down at Javonte Williams or Rachaad White. Ownership, I think, is massive when it comes to helping you find the chalk for cash games, but then also giving you the leverage plays for tournaments. Same type thing. Like if you're going to go to tight end, if everybody's going to go to Kittle at 5,800 because everybody just saw in prime time what Travis Kelce did to Tampa Bay secondary, what if you went McBride at 57 or Otten at 55 or Kelce at 6,000? Ownership's far down on them. If they match Kittle, you're in the clear. You've now gained some leverage. Maybe you saved a little bit, or you have of the elite tight ends, you have the one guy who's 8% owned and everybody else got half the points that you got at 12% ownership. I think it's really helpful for tournaments, especially if you're building multiple lineups, to help you differentiate in 1 or 2 spots, zig when they zag, and you try to gain leverage on the field.
Yeah, I think the concept of that core 4 or core 5 is really good because I think you do go, hey, these are the guys that I'm confident are going to have solid weeks. They're going to have a high floor and maybe, a super high floor, and I can then make some variants out of that. And I think you're right. I think you really have to look at tiering players, so tiering the tight end. So if you think Kittle and Kelce and Otten and McBride are all the same, well, maybe you take the less, not necessarily the cheapest guy, but the less owned guy in that tier and go, okay, hey, he may be the second highest price, but he's the least owned. I'll just take him, right? And you do save some money, but you get the less owner and you can kind of get some outliers, which I think is really interesting. Any other differences between like a big contest and small contest that you recommend or you do when you're looking at like a big, maybe like a Millie Maker or even a big cash game? Let's say it's a 100-person game versus a 10-person game.
The main thing I look at, obviously, besides entry fee, just because I'm not out here I'm balling on a budget. You know, it's not a champagne taste; it's a Miller High Life taste sometimes, just because I'm risk adverse when it comes to that. But I think the best thing to do is, regardless of, and this is personal, other people might tell you otherwise, but for someone like me, maybe you're a cash game player and you want to start dabbling in tournaments, or you want to dabble in GPPs because you You like the big payout. I get it.
Yeah.
I'm addicted to the bright lights too. Totally get it. I would say set that filter to single entry tournaments. Don't try to be out there beating, Billy Bob, who's got 7 different lineups in this contest. Set it to single entry tournament. You take your best shot at others' best shots. That's the way to do it, instead of your 1 entry versus Dustin's 6, my 5, Heather's 4. Don't worry about that. Filter it to single entry tournaments. That is honestly one of the first things I do when it comes to tournaments. I'm not playing a ton of tournaments anyway, but when I do, I go right to single entry tournaments. I want the same number of entries as every other person in that contest.
Yeah, I think that's important. Like, and even if the entry cost is low, like it could be a 25-cent entry. The people who enter in multiple entries, they've paid for all the resources. They probably have spreadsheets and algorithms that are printing out these different things, and they have more time because they probably are winning more. If you're just a casual gamer, I think you're right. I think you have to look at a single entry and go, hey, what's my best shot that I can do for this one tournament to compare to someone else's best shot? It's not, you don't want your best shot versus someone else's 8 shots. Because if they're putting in 8 shots, they're probably putting more time and effort into it than you are. And there's just going to be sharks out there, and the bigger prize pools are going to draw in bigger sharks. So I think that's huge when I think you're talking about, and I think if you do get into those, I think that's where, let's say in a smaller contest, you might have your core 5. In a bigger contest, you might have a core 3 because you need more outliers. You need to be more different because that's the only way to stand out from the crowd. You can't roll with the top 5 guys that you have in all these lineups. I think when you're in a bigger contest with more people, I think you have to differentiate just a little more. Like I said, if you go from a core 5 in a small tournament to a core 3 in a big tournament, just because you have to differentiate.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some apps, because there's obviously people know about DraftKings and FanDuel's. Prize Picks has really pushed up. Underdog is kind of out there. They kind of do some stuff. We talked about Fantasy Spin. What are some of the other apps that people don't know about that you really enjoy playing DFS on?
Well, there's quite a few, to be honest, I would say. So obviously, yes, Fantasy Spin. Make sure you download that. It's awesome. One of my favorite ones out there. It's worked its way. It made its way in my rotation back when it was Better Fantasy. Then it got acquired.
Yeah.
Fantasy Spin still in my rotation. Smash Up has become in my rotation now. I do that every single week, so that one's really fun. So you have the DraftKings type feel. Players have prices. You add them in, and then you got the power up cards. I believe that's what they call them. I hope I'm saying it right. But that's where you can have like. I'm trying to think of some. I always love to play the home field advantage. So any player that you have who plays at home gets a 1.25 multiplier. You have other ones where every missed kick by your kicker is actually worth 8 points instead of -2. You have one where if your defense allows 30 points or 35 points, they get like 15 or 20 points. That one's really fun. That's a game in a game in a game.
A game in a game. Yep.
That one's a lot of fun. Highly recommend that one. Another one was also at the Fantasy Football Expo this year. Micro Draft is a lot of fun. You get to challenge people, and you just do head-to-head snake drafts. The player pool is already determined for you. You're just drafting a team right in there. So give Micro Draft a shout out. I'm trying to think of, and there's some other ones that are technically not DFS that are kind of in my weekly rotation, but I would say outside of making DraftKings and FanDuel lineups, my big 3 are definitely Fantasy Spin, Smash Up, and Micro Draft.
And so they're not technically DFS, but I play Locker, where you get to answer questions based on the outcomes games. So it'll say who's going to score the first touchdown for whatever the game, the Jets. Who's going to have more receptions on the next drive? And you can answer those questions. You get points. And then I like Loser Ball, which Loser Ball is where you pick the.
That's the one I was going to say. I didn't know if I could say that because I'm like, it's not technically DFS because it's not
technically
player,
DFS,
but it's in
that realm of to me, it's in that realm of a gamified fantasy that is strictly based on that week. It's not like a season long. So Loser Ball, you're trying to pick the 3 worst teams that are going to perform the worst. So I think you get points for a pick 6, right? You get negative points. You want to have the most negative points.
Yep.
So it's just an interesting way of doing it. I just downloaded Gritty. Which is interesting. They just have a game right now. They're eventually going to turn into a fantasy platform, but they have an interesting game where you're trying to match people, based on their year they're drafted and the team, the division they play for. So there are some ones, but I think Fantasy Spin, I think me and you have been playing Fantasy Spin for 2-3 years now. Obviously I had Will on a couple weeks ago. I think it's a great app in terms of fun gameplay, the right balance of skill versus luck. And I think that's when we're talking DFS. I think that's where people have to find their niche and how much of skill versus luck do you want in your DFS game? Because it is a game at the end of the day. And do you want a game where you are going with luck, which I think is what the big Millie Maker type tournaments are? It's more luck than skill, where I think a cash game is a lot more skill. And the way you approach it, you, Colby, seem to approach it in a way where you're like, "Hey, I just wanna win something. I just wanna be profitable. I don't need to be first. I just wanna be in the money." And I think that's definitely part of it because I think you're going, "Hey, my skill can get me there. My skill will get me where I win money. My luck might get me into where I win a little extra money." So I think that's definitely interesting.
Yeah, and there's all element. I mean, there's skill and luck to all of it, right?
Yeah.
Like there's definitely it there, and ultimately part of it does come down to, are you doing it for fun? Are
Mhm.
you doing it like, of course, I'm not going in there saying like, oh, if I lose everything I enter this week, that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, I'm obviously not saying that. Like, I do want to win, but ultimately at the end of the day, I do it to have fun. I want to have fun with it. Win a couple bucks, that's great. I'm not here trying to retire. Like, I'm not trying to hit that million maker so I can retire. That'd be cool, but I'm not entering it, so I'm not in it to win it. So like that's another thing too, that you just have to have an honest conversation with yourself in terms of like, is this for fun? Is this not? Like, there are times where I'll do one DraftKings lineup for $2 for the weekend and that's it. Like,
Yeah.
that's just because that I had time. That's what I was able to do. That's what it's going to be. I'll have other weeks where I max out all my entries in the main event on Fantasy Spin, and that comes, it's like $5 a pop, and there's over 10 entries or however many you can get. So like, it just depends on the week. You just have to make the decision. Are you doing it for fun and trying to win money, obviously, or are you like, you're trying to make this profitable, like almost like this is going to be my main source of income type thing? Like, those are decisions you have to make, and then how you kind of decide that will help dictate that from there. And of course, there's always skill, there's always luck. Like, you can do we've seen it in fantasy football, right? We
You can
put
do
all
all the
this time,
research.
in the off season. Everything's going to be perfect. I am doing all of this. Like, CJ Stroud's he's going to be basically the best non-rushing quarterback this year.
Mhm.
Boy, was I wrong on the three dudes in the middle of that offensive line. You're going to be wrong. There's going to be things that happen. You can have the perfect lineup. And, we joke about it if you love your team on draft day, it's going to stink. It's one
Yeah.
of those things. Like, it's the same thing. Like, you do all the research. Like last week, I was all in on AJ Brown against Jacksonville. He's one of the best receivers against man coverage. Hurts his knee. I love Puka. Great matchup against Seattle. He punched a
Punch
dude.
the dude. Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's just certain things that, like, sometimes you get the bear and sometimes the bear gets you. That's just how it's going to be. So that's why all these games are skill. All these games are luck. It's a good blend of both. And, at the end of the day, just have fun. If it's not fun, listen to your heart, listen to your mind, listen to your wallet, whatever it is. But like, this is all meant to be fun at the end of the day.
Yeah, I would say, like, if you're sitting there on a Sunday night and you are stressed that you didn't win or you may or may not win, then I think you've gone to the point where you might have a problem. And if you do have a problem with gambling, like, obviously get help, reach out. There's the hotline. I'll put the number in the description. We obviously don't want you to have a problem where it becomes something that affects your life outside of the game, right? If you're wasting your money that you need to pay bills, that's not the way it is. It's not like, oh, I'm going to pay $5 and win this million. I'm going to be okay and I can quit. No, you need to be doing it for fun. You need to be responsible with your money and with your gameplay. So I think that's important. So that was DFS Colby. Before we get out of here, let's do a fun draft. We are going to do a draft of the swag you would like to get from your DFS provider. Obviously, you're wearing your fantasy spin hat. We see these places at the expo or these places giving out all kinds of swag. So let's do a 3-round draft. I'm going to let you have the first pick of swag you'd like to get from your DFS provider. If your DFS provider showed up at your door and was like, "Hey, Colby, I have this. Thanks for playing." What would you want to get from them? What's your first pick?
Yep. It is going to be the hat.
Your hat?
I love the hat, but I'm going to be specific. It's got to be this Richardson style 112. If it's not a Richardson style 112 hat, I don't want it. This is my favorite style of hat. It's got the nice trucker. Selfishly, it looks good on my head. I like to think so. I have a ton of other hats over here that are not Richardson 112. They are just okay. If you have a Richardson style 112 trucker hat, that is 101 of any swag.
I would agree with you. I think a hat is a 101. I don't wear them a ton, but I do enjoy having them. I think they're just great to throw on if you're going outside or I'll shower and then my hair is just a hot mess. So I'm like, I'll just throw in a hat. I don't feel like if I can run to the store. That would have been my 101. I think since I've got 2 picks, we'll do a snake draft here. I'll take a shirt. I love getting a nice shirt that I can just kind of wear around the house, rep the brand if I'm going out. I'm very particular about what I wear out. So if I'm gonna wear a shirt, especially a shirt, a hat I don't care because no one really. But if I'm gonna wear a shirt that has your company logo on it, I really want to make sure that it's something I'm representing. So if I'm playing on your DFS app and you're like, here's a shirt, then that's something I want to represent. I want to make sure it's a nice shirt, good quality. There's nothing better than like a good quality soft like t-shirt, to be honest with you. Like I think it's just a nice thing to have. Um, saves me the money from buying t-shirts, which are just seem to be expensive, and I can just have a bunch of them and
Sure.
love having free shirts. It's kind of like a hat. Like if I just have it, I can throw it on. If it's free and I have to paint a room and I get paint on it, like I don't care if it's a free shirt. What do I care?
Yep.
So that'll be my first pick. I think my second pick, this is going to be an unconventional one, but I love a good pen. I love a good free pen. I love pens that have, I have some, I work at the University of Wisconsin. We have some that have like they got the stylus tip where the pen comes out, but the back half has like a waxy highlighter to it. It's really cool.
Right.
And I steal those every time I get a chance of those. And I love a good pen. You can never have too many. I think they're great just to throw in your bag, throw in your car. Like all my backpacks have 4 or 5 pens in them. You give them out to someone, they go away. I think it's just a great second point of communication. So I think as a marketing person, I meet you and I go, hey, I'm so and so from so and so. You're gonna forget, but if I give you a pen, you're gonna use a pen. And you go, oh, this is from so and so. Oh yeah, I remember I met that guy and he was cool and I liked their habit. It's just that extra point of contact. So I'll take a shirt and then a pen. What would be your second pick? You get 2 and 3. Finish out your draft.
Oh, this is like a honorable mention just because it's in there. But from the expo this last year, Dynasty Decks did the mobile charging pack. Phenomenal. Only
Phenomenal.
thing is, I don't need a ton of those. One's good. So like,
oh no, I need a ton of those.
I can't. Okay, well, you can have a ton. I only need one. Really, I work from home. I only need one.
We're a Disney family, so they are great for Disney.
Sure, gotcha. Yeah,
I got 2 of them from him. I got mine from my bag, and I got when they were great. That was like above and beyond the swag. I think that's like above and beyond swag. That's like we are really going to make an impression, and they did. And I told them that you made an impression with these chargers. Yep. They were great. They have the adapters for your different phones. Those are great.
That one was sweet. But my second pick, I am going to go just with one that I was most excited to get at the expo this year. I love a good pint glass. I got the football guys one, the one beer away from talking about sleeper tight ends. Nice. Love that style of pint glass because it's like more of like the can style, I guess you could technically call it.
Yep.
I also love a good craft beer, so it kind of fits well with the kind of what I like. I do really love koozies. I'll be honest. Like I love koozie, but I have so many. The one I wish we got more of though, and I'll actually do this for my third pick. I like a beer in the evening, but I like coffee in the morning. If you could do a coffee mug, I would be really okay with that. And even if it's just a small little 8 or 10 ounce one, perfect for an espresso type drink or a frou-frou latte if you want to do something like that. If you have all the stuff at home, I'm really tempted to go koozie, but I think my third pick, I think I'm going to go with the coffee cup, the coffee mug.
Yeah, a nice coffee mug. Even it's just, the nice ceramic mugs. Like I get those from, again, I work at the university, so all the departments have different swag. And we have one that has mugs, and I get one probably once every couple months. Just take it to my office, I drop it, it breaks. I go get another one, I bring it home, whatever it is. It's just something nice. I don't drink coffee, but I love a good hot chocolate. Like that's just something that's nice. It's nice when it's cold out to have a nice mug that's heat up. You can hold it, not by the handle, but hold it by the mug so your hands get warm. I agree with you. I think people do koozies. Obviously, they're cheaper. They're great for your sodas or beers, but there's something just different about a coffee mug. And same thing with the pint glass. It's just a nice all-around thing. You're like, man, this kind of like the battery chargers. It's like, man, they spent up a little bit in their swag to get something. So I think those are 2 great picks. So
I will throw a disclaimer though. I'm gonna get a little bit on a soapbox here. If you go the coffee mug, test the thing out because if you have to put the coffee cup back in the microwave and the handle gets hot where I can't grab it, I'm out. That's number one. Secondly, for a koozie, not the thin ones. I want the thicker walled ones. The very, very cheap, flimsy ones, no thank you. But the nice kind of little sturdier, a little bit thicker koozies, that's where you can get me. So take the flimsy koozies out, but the nice thicker ones, that's a good koozie.
I think swag to me is one of those things that really represents what you think of your customers and what you're willing to invest into your customers. I agree with you. When you get those flimsy kind of things, you're like, oh, this is cheap. These little bands, bracelets, things. I'm like, I don't need a bunch of those. Like, I'm never gonna wear them. They don't really fit. Like, I have thin wrists and like they're just like tight. And I don't like them. They pinch my hair. Like, no. Like, give me something that's like usable. That's right. When those did those, when I saw those battery chargers next, I was like, man, I thought I got something special when I opened my swag bag with that battery
I
charger.
did
Like,
too.
is
I
this
did
supposed to
too.
be in here? Like, this is nice. So you went hat, then you went pint glass, and then you went coffee mug. I
Yep.
went shirt, then pen. This last one might sound weird, but I really like the foam stress ball things. Whether it's a football, whether it's a baseball. A buddy of mine at work has a whole collection of them on his desk. So I brought back a ton from the expo because he's got sumo wrestlers and cows and milk trucks, and now he's got footballs. They're just fun. They're fun for my son who's 11. He's got to remind you know, I came home and just started chucking them at him. Like I had a whole bag, I was just throwing them at him. Like they're just a fun thing to have around the house. They're great to throw at the TV when your team's not doing great. I don't know if you watch that teacher who does class with their team on Twitter slash Facebook. Well, she's got, and she's got them for her kids, and the teams have been sending her a bunch of swag, and she loves it when they get there. They're just a great thing for everyone. Like they're just fun to have. You can use them as a stress ball. You can throw them at people. You can throw them at the TV. It's just a fun thing. And it just says like, hey, we're a fun company that wants to have fun. We want you to be able to toss something around, even though it's just a little football that's this big,
Mhm.
you can throw it around, have fun with your friends while you're watching the game. I think it helps build community, just adds a little extra in there. I think very much like the pint glass and the mug. It's just something that adds to my everyday life, not something that's just I'm going to use once and forget about.
Yeah,
So
I agree, and that's it's one of those things too where like you have the standard swag items like
yep.
koozies, pretty basic. Like, I mean, what are probably the most basic ones that like if you were to like the most generic items that you can throw in a bag for swag? I know you love
It's
them, but I would think a pen probably gets
pen.
put into that.
You
Like,
don't see pens a ton. You really don't see pens much anymore because I think people think they're passe, like they've done it, but the plastic wristbands, the Live Strong bracelets,
yeah.
koozies, stickers. I'm over stickers. I just don't need your stickers.
Yeah, stickers can be cool. I mean, I think you have to have I think you have to have a need for them, right? Like my buddy he got like a beer fridge or a fridge for the garage and he wanted to
Yeah,
decorate. So like he was all about the stickers. Like I totally get that. If you have like younger kids, the stickers are cool. Or like
yeah,
my wife wanted to get her water bottle, covered
yeah.
in stickers. So like we got to like, if you have a purpose for them, it's nice. Otherwise, like they're very quick to like, oh yeah, I'll take them home, and then when you go home and empty the bag, they go in the trash right away.
But like do something different. Like here's one from the sports affiliate, like your team just got Moss. Like that's a
Yep.
fun sticker.
Yep.
Like the one with just your logo, I don't need. I love what Scott Fishbowl does with like, the Baskin Robbins and the logos. Those stickers are fun.
Yep.
Your football guys, your what's his Black Eyed Joe, or whatever they call him. Sandro has his face. Like, do something fun with your sticker. Don't just give me your logo.
Yep.
Um,
Fair.
unless it's really cool. Like, make them metallic, make them glow in the dark, make them something. But yeah, you gotta have a specific purpose for it. I get those magazines from those companies that do all this swag stuff. Like, give me something cool. I don't need more of the tote bags. That's also like a classic one that you get, that, the expo bag that came in. Like, that's
Yep.
something you see from people. That's very basic. Um, that's why I think we were all impressed by the charger. Like, the battery pack was just above me. Like, they're not cheap. Those were
Mm-mm.
not cheap items. And he had to buy, I think, 1,000 of them.
Yeah. And I
So
mean, actually I was using mine. I just got a new phone. I have to see if it has like the cord for it now. But
it should, inside it is the cord.
yeah, I mean, I think it probably does. I just haven't, again, I work from home, so I don't really leave often. So it's hard for me to have it. But like I'm pretty sure my wife took hers. She's traveling right now. I'm pretty sure she has it with her. Like we've used it other stuff. So like I love it. I love that thing. There it
So
is.
if you look at it, yeah,
Yep.
this is the one they got. So
That
this
thing's
white
awesome.
part pops out, and it's got I don't know if that's micro USB, but in there
Yep.
is the adapter that I think goes to Lightning.
Yep. I have to
So
I think mine's either in my travel bag or it's out on the counter. I don't know where it is, but I
my
do love that
travel
thing.
bag is right next to me that has all my cords and adapters and stuff. I think that's a great thing to get to someone, like give them like adapters for different phones and chargers. I think that's a fun thing that we don't see a lot. I would love to see like a mini screwdriver, like a screwdriver, like one of those like multi-head screwdrivers, something like that.
Oh, I do love the I don't have my gosh, I literally am unprepared. I don't have anything with me here at my desk. I got it at Scott Fishbowl. I got another one at the Expo. I did the live draft for Scott Fishbowl, but the credit card bottle opener.
Oh yeah, those are cool. Yep.
Thicker one fits right in my wallet. Sweet.
Oh, that thing. Oh, the ones from the Scott Fishbowl are beefy.
Yes, I like that one. That was a good one that I recently got. Now you got me looking up like creative swag items.
I mean, there's like little things that you can get, like a little mini multi-tool. I've seen those at different events. Like those are nice. I think if you're a company listening and I think you want to do some swag, like come up with something that's a little different and a little out there. And I think you represent your brand. I think a multi-tool, a multi-head screwdriver, something that clips on your keys, something that has a bottle opener, I think just sets you apart because again, it's something that I'm going to use more often. A little flash drive, those are great. We don't see those hardly ever. Those are pretty inexpensive.
A couple years ago for the Expo, I say Bob did. I mean, he did most of it, obviously, but Bob did the luggage tag. That was cool. I still have that on my travel bag that's easily identifiable. That was a neat thing. I understand you probably can't do that every single year, but every couple years, pop a new luggage tag like for people, because especially for like the Expo, I mean, it's not just all local people. Like people are flying in and traveling. It's nice for me to like identify my bag that way. I thought that was a really neat kind of one-off one that I'd never seen before.
Yeah, and with luggage tags, Disney does luggage tags. Like that's one of their swag items you can get for free if you live in a Disney hotel. So if Disney's willing to do it, I think you should probably be willing to do it. Like I think that says a lot about their willingness to give out luggage tags. So it is. Even if you just did one every 4 years and put either the Expo on one side, maybe you put a player or something on the other side, or some sort of fantasy football thing, does make it easy to find your bag.
Sure does.
So I think that's huge. I've gotten some really cool swag. Like I've gotten backpacks and really nice hoodies and stuff. That's a little much, but I think if you could do something just the next tier up from the koozie and the pen and the stickers, I think if you just do the next step up, I think you find some really nice stuff. So that's been our draft. You went hat, pint glass, and coffee mug. I went shirt, pen, and the little foam stress ball. So that was our draft. Well, but this has been fun talking about DFS. Before we get out of here, tell everyone one last time where they can find you and what you got going on this year.
Absolutely. So over on X at Colby Conway, find my writing and or face and voice at Fantasy Alarm, Fantasy and Frames, Big Guy Fantasy Sports, and producing some content with Fantasy Spin as well. And throughout the football season, I got for your DFS lineups, doing the wide receiver coach over at Fantasy Alarm. I just break down a bunch of fantasy football news and notes over at Fantasy and Frames. For Big Guy Fantasy Sports, Ron Rigney and I build DFS lineups for DraftKings called the Consistently Cashing Podcast. Then I do a little player props with Bob Lung on the Prop It Like It's Hot podcast. I think that covers all of my bases for the fantasy football season. And then once after that, we're into fantasy baseball after that.
Baseball starts up pretty quick. It does. It seems just ended and it's back right away.
It comes quick.
It does. Well, thank you guys. This has been Bridge the Gap. Sorry I missed last week. I was had the flu/COVID last week, so we missed last week's show. So it's great to have Colby on. We'll be back next week. We got Chew, Father Dynasty coming on. We're going to be talking about creating core memories for you and your family and how sports play into core memories. So we look forward to that. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in.